This is how I make this generously sized water jug and wash bowl using a printable pottery template. Templates are great when you're hand building sets of the same item with the same proportions. Here's the same style of jug decorated with 2 different glazes. The first thing that I do is I roll a slab of clay. I roll the clay slab using 3mm roller guides. Roller guides are the wooden sticks on either side of the clay slab. They help me roll an even slab of a particular thickness. When the slab is the right size and thickness, it's important to run a rib over both sides to get rid of any texture left behind by the fabric and also to align the clay particles. When a slab is big like this, I turn it over by putting a sheet of fabric on top and flipping the whole thing over. I then cut out each section of the template. This is a printable template, and I'll put a link to my online store in the description below if you'd like to get a copy. The template I'm using here is paper, but you can cut it out on craft foam, which lasts longer. I cut around each of the pieces of the template with my clay knife. This section here is going to be the bottom half of the jug. Any clay scraps can be wedged and recycled. At the moment, the clay is very soft and needs to be put to one side to firm up a little. To move the clay without stretching it, I put a couple of pieces of paper on top, and then I put a flexible chopping board on top of those. Then I flip the whole thing over. The slab can now be picked up without losing its shape. I slide the clay on the paper onto my wooden drying board and put it to one side whilst I cut out the rest of the pieces of the jug. This is the shoulder of the jug. This is the rim of the jug. And this is the base of the jug. I roll a small clay slab using 6mm roller guides. This is going to be the slab that I cut the handle out of. I find that 6mm feels a little bit better, it's a bit more comfortable to hold than 3mm for the handle. So I cut around the template for the handle shape. When I'm letting the slabs firm up, I usually wrap the handle in some plastic as it dries out very quickly and I want to be able to bend it into shape later. This is what all the cut pieces look like. I put another wooden board on top of the cut slabs whilst they're firming up to keep them flat. This section of the template is the lower portion of the jug. The slab will curve around like this to form a cone shape. The first thing that I do is I bevel some of the edges of the clay. Beveling is cutting the clay at a bit of an angle, like this. I bevel a short curve of the slab because when it's bent around in a cone, I want the edge to sit flat against the base of the jug like this. When I've beveled the short curved edge, I then turn the clay over and bevel the longer curve. It's important to turn the clay over at this point. The shoulder of the jug is going to join with the top edge of the bottom cone, and if I don't turn the clay over, the 2 edges won't sit flat against each other. Like this. So I turn the slab over and I bevel all the way along the long curved edge too. Lastly, I bevel both of the 2 short straight edges. This is so that when I curve the clay into a cone shape, the 2 edges overlap in a flush finish when I join them. Again, it's important to turn the slab before you bevel the second straight edge so that the 2 edges do overlap. I score into the 2 short edges using my clay scoring tool. Then I pick up the slab and curve it around into a cone shape on my banding wheel. I then apply clay slip to both scored edges. I line the edges up together and then press them together to make a nice strong join. Once I've pressed the seams together, I run my rubber rib over the outside, turn it around and then use my left hand to support the outside of the clay slabs and use my wooden modelling tool just to blend the seam in on the inside. Then I use the rubber rib again just to smooth the clay, get rid of any marks left behind by the modelling tool on the outside and the inside too. This is the base of the jug. I just put my maker's mark on the bottom, turn the slab over, and then I use my clay scoring tool to score into the edge all the way around the base. Just inverting the clay cone And then I'm using my serrated rib tool to score into the bottom edge of the bottom half of the jug. I apply some clay slip to both of the scored surfaces. Then I turn the bottom portion of the jug the right way up and lower it into position on the base of the jug. The base is just a bit bigger than the bottom edge, and that's just to give you a bit of wiggle room so you can position it correctly. And then I trim off a little bit of that excess with my clay knife. I usually leave about 1 millimetre all the way around on the bottom. That just gives me a little bit of extra clay to blend the base of the jug onto the bottom edge of the jug. So I just blend it on with my wooden tool, supporting it on the inside with my left hand, and then just using the wooden tool to blend that little excess bit of clay onto the bottom section of the jug. I roll a thin coil of clay. If you want some tips on rolling coils, you can check out my video here. And then I'm going to put that clay coil on the inside join at the bottom of the jug. So put a little bit of slip. I'm just putting a bit of slip around the bottom inside edge, and then I dangle the coil in there and I'm just pressing it gently into the corner. It's a bit difficult to see from the camera angle here, but I'm just pressing it gently into the corner, trimming it to length. Once it's in position, it should look a little bit like that. I'm using a stylus tool there. It's a little tool with a rounded metal end. I just use that to press the coil into the bottom corner, just smoothing it in with the rounded end of the stylus tool. And then I take my damp chamois leather and I just run that over the surface of the clay just to get rid of any marks left behind by the stylus tool. And it looks like that once it's been smoothed down. I turn the cone over, peel away the paper, and then I'm just going to tidy up the bottom edge. I use my wooden tool and scrape away some of the extra clay that's been left behind. I use my clay knife just to tidy it up a little bit more. Then I use the rubber rib to smooth down as many of the marks left behind by the wooden tool. Then I use a piece of damp chamois leather to smooth it down and get rid of any marks left behind. Give it a nice smooth finish. Put a little piece of paper on the bottom there, that's just to stop it from sticking to the wooden bat. Cover it with a plastic bag and put it to one side. This is the template for the shoulder of the jug, which is going to curve around in a cone shape like this. Again, I'm going to bevel both of the curved edges of the slab. I bevel the short curve first. This is the edge that will join the rim of the jug, and I want the edge of the shoulder and the rim to sit flat with each other. I then turn the slab over and I bevel the longer curved edge. This is the edge that's going to join to the bottom half of the jug which I just made. Again, I bevel the two short straight edges. I bevel one side, turn it over and then bevel the other side, and that's because I'm going to make this slab into a cone shape too, and I want the two short edges to overlap in a flush join when they're positioned together. I score into the two short edges with my clay scoring tool and then curve the clay into a circle, a cone shape, lift it onto my banding wheel and then put some slip on both of the scored edges and again press the two edges together to form a strong bond. I compress it with my rubber rib and then I use my wooden tool to blend it in on the inside surface. And then I use the rubber rib to tidy up any marks left behind by the wooden tool. Now I'm going to join the shoulder onto the lower portion of the jug. That's the piece that I made earlier. There was a bowl in there just to keep the rim nice and round. I score into the top edge with my serrated rib tool and also onto the bottom edge of the shoulder. I apply some slip to both of the scored surfaces and then I lower the shoulder onto the bottom part of the jug, just lining it up carefully. Then I spend a little bit of time just making sure that the two rims are lined up with each other. And then once they're aligned, I just use the tips of my fingers to go around the outside and blend the outside surface together. I then get a thin clay coil, apply some clay slip to the inside join, and then I put the coil into the join on the inside, just pressing it into place gently with my fingers. And then I use my wooden tool to blend the clay coil into the join. Once it's blended in, I just smooth over the surface with the damp chamois leather And then you'll probably find that the seam on the outside has opened up a little whilst you're putting the coil on the inside. So just go around and I'm just blending the join back in on the outside. And then when it's blended in, I just tidy up the join with my rubber rib tool and then remove any marks left behind with the damp chamois leather. Put a bowl in the rim just to keep it nice and round whilst that's sitting to one side. This is the template for the rim of the jug, and this is the slab that I cut out using that template a little earlier on. Again, I'm just going to bevel the shorter curve, as this is the side of the slab that's going to sit on the top of the shoulder of the jug. And then I just bevel the two short ends. And then I wipe down the rim. The top curve is the very top of the rim of the jug, so I'm just smoothing that off with a damp sponge and the tip of my finger, because it's much easier to smooth down the edge of the clay when it's flat on the worktop. So scoring into the two ends, curving it into shape, apply some slip, and then I join the two ends together in the same way that I joined the other cone-shaped slabs. So just pushing the ends together and then blending it in with the rubber rib and also the wooden tool. Once the rim has been assembled, then I join it to the bottom part of the jug in the same way that I did before, so just scoring into the surfaces and then applying some slip and then lowering the rim into position, just lining it up so that the two edges meet. And then once they're lined up properly, just pressing it gently into place. And then I use my wooden modelling tool just to blend the inside join, going all the way around, making sure that it's all sealed up, just to make sure that it doesn't open up when it's drying. Then I use a smaller wooden tool just to blend the join on the outside. And then just wiping it down with the damp chamois leather just to get rid of any marks in the clay. Wipe it down on the outside and on the inside. Then I shape the wide end of the rim, that is going to be the spout, and just sort of squeezing it together to create a nice spout shape so that the water or the liquid flows out of the jug nicely once it's been fired and glazed. Now I'm going to prepare the handle to attach it to the jug. This is the strip that I made a little earlier on. I'm just running a damp sponge down each of the edges of the clay, just because it's easier to smooth off the corners whilst the clay's flat. And then I curve it into shape and I put it on a wooden drying board just to let it firm up for a while. Leave it until it's leather hard, and once the clay handle is leather hard, I'm just cutting a little concave shape there on the end, each end of the handle, just so that it sits nice and neatly against the edge of the curved edge of the jug. And then to attach the handle, I just hold it in position on the jug, line it up so that I'm happy with the position, and then I mark with my clay knife, make a few marks on the jug where I'm going to attach the handle, take the handle away, and then I score in with my clay scoring tool, and I also score into the ends of the handle too. I apply some slip to both ends and also to the jug itself, and then put the handle in position and gently press it into place. Line it up first and then press it into place. I've got my left hand on the inside of the jug there, and I'm just applying some pressure on the outside, wiggling it around, just making sure that it's really securely attached. Then, as a bit of extra security, what I do is I add a small coil of clay all the way around each of the points at which the handle joins the jug. So I just wrap the clay coil around and then blend it on with a modelling tool, pressing it into the corners first and then smoothing it over the join. And then I repeat the same thing with the lower join. Let's just make sure that when the jug is full of water and it's quite heavy, the handle isn't going to fall off. Then once again, I just smooth out any marks that have been left behind on the clay. Then I reshape the handle just a little bit, and then the jug is ready to be put to one side and dried before firing. This is the template for the bowl. It's got a curvy fluted edge and it's going to wrap around like that. So just the same process really, just rolling a slab of clay, putting the template in place and then cutting around the template. So again, the clay's very soft. I'm going to put it to one side just to let it firm up for a little while. And then I'm just going to cut out the base of the bowl. I bevel the bottom edge of the bowl because I want that bottom edge to sit flat against the base of the bowl when it's attached. Bevel the two short straight edges. Remember to turn the slab over before you bevel the second short edge. And then I'm just using a damp chamois leather there to smooth off the rim of the bowl before I assemble it. So turn it over and just smooth out the other side too. Score into the edges and then curve it into place. And then I join the seams of the bowl together in the same way that I did before, just with some clay slip and then blending the two edges together. This is a bundle of old plastic bags covered with an old towel, and then once the bowl is leather hard, I turn it upside down and put it onto the towel just to support it, and then I score into the bottom edge of the bowl and also score into the edge all the way along the base of the bowl too. Apply some slip to both scored sides and then lower it into position. The base of the bowl is a little bit bigger than the bottom of the bowl, and that's just to give you some excess so that you can position the bowl and have a little bit of extra clay to blend in. So make sure that the bowl's right in the centre of the slab, and then I press it gently into place. And then I use my clay knife just to trim off a little bit of the extra, so there's about 1 millimetre to spare all the way around the bottom. Then I use that little bit of excess clay just to secure the base of the bowl onto the bottom edge of the bowl, blending it in all the way around. And then I'm going to apply a little bit of slip to the inside join, and then put a coil on the inside join of the bowl too, pressing it in with my fingers. And then again I use the stylus tool to smooth that clay coil into the corner. Sometimes when you're firing large flat pieces like this, or like a plate or a platter, is that cracks can form across the flat base. One way to avoid that is to add a foot ring. So I'm going to add a foot ring to this bowl. I start by rolling a slab of clay that's 6 millimeters thick, and then I'm just going to cut some strips in the clay. I've got a little template there for making the foot ring. It's just a strip of paper that's the right width. So I'm just demonstrating a few ways of making the foot ring here. One is to use the template. Another way is to use a trimming tool like that. If you have a trimming tool that's got a square end, what you can do is you can just press it into the clay and then drag it through the clay. And it's quite an easy, efficient way of creating a strip of clay that's got a uniform thickness. Or alternatively, if you like, you can just freestyle it and just cut it by eye. Now I'm going to turn the bowl over, and what I'm doing there is I'm just putting a few items in there, like an old cake tin and an old pottery form. It's just something that is tall enough to support the bowl so that the rim will just hang down over the edge. So turn it upside down, and then I'm just marking on the base of the bowl there where I want the foot ring to go. Make a little mark with my clay knife and then score into the base where I'm going to attach the foot ring with my clay scoring tool. Then I trim the foot ring to length. I score on the underside of the foot ring, apply some slip, and then put it in position on the bottom of the bowl. Then I noticed that I'd cut the foot ring just a little bit too short, so I'm putting a tiny little section of clay in there just to make it the right length. Then I blend the strip of clay onto the base of the bowl, blending it on the inside and the outside edges of the foot ring. And then smooth down the surface, using my finger to support the inside so that the foot ring doesn't lose its shape. And then I'm putting a tiny blob of clay on there because I noticed that at the join where the foot ring joined there was a little dent in the clay, so just to make sure that the foot ring is nice and even on the work surface and doesn't wobble on the table, just put a little blob of clay in there just to smooth that out. And then the same thing applies with the other side. With the other join, just put a tiny blob of clay on there. Then I use a ruler to make some marks in the clay. I'm not actually measuring anything, I'm just using the ruler to make some marks in the clay that are an equal distance apart. Then I use the round end of a paintbrush just to make some notches or some indents into the foot ring. Those notches just help the air circulate when the clay is being fired, and it helps to prevent the base from cracking when it's being fired. And then once the foot ring has been added, the bowl is basically ready to be dried and then fired and then decorated in whatever way you like.